The great hall of the palace was filled with silence. Hundreds of nobles stood in rows, their silver skin shining under the light of 3 moons that hung in the sky outside the tall windows. Princess walked slowly toward the altar, her long white dress trailing behind her like a river of silk. She did not want this marriage. No one in her empire wanted this marriage, but war had brought them here and peace demanded a price. The humans had arrived in their galaxy only 50 years ago. At first, the Empire had laughed at them. These small creatures with their soft bodies and short lives, what threat could they possibly be? But the humans had spread like fire across the stars. They built ships faster than anyone thought possible. They formed alliances with species that had refused to speak with them for centuries. And when the first border conflict happened, the humans had fought back with a fury that shocked everyone. The war lasted only 3 years, but it was enough. The council decided that peace was better than more blood, and peace, they said, required a symbol, a marriage between their princess and a human commander. Reached the altar and turned to face the crowd. Her mother, the empress, sat on her throne with a face made of stone. Her younger sister stood nearby, tears running down her cheeks. The nobles whispered to each other, their words like the hissing of snakes. Then the doors opened, and he walked in. Admiral of Earth's United Fleet was not what it expected. She had imagined a giant, a monster, a beast wrapped in human skin. The story said humans were savage, wild, dangerous. But the man who walked toward her was quiet. He was tall for a human, but still shorter than most. His hair was black like the space between stars, and his eyes were dark and calm. He wore a simple uniform, no medals, no decorations, nothing to show his rank except a small silver pin on his chest. He stopped in front of her and bowed his head slightly. "Princess," he said. His voice was soft. Said nothing. She simply looked at him, trying to understand what kind of creature stood before her. The humans lived such short lives, 80 years, perhaps 100 if they were lucky. They lived for 500 years or more. To marry this man was to marry a ghost, someone who would fade and die while she remained young. The ceremony was quick. Words were spoken. Vows were exchanged. When the priest asked if she accepted this union, said yes, though the word tasted like ash in her mouth. When he asked the same question, the human simply nodded and said, "I do." There was no celebration afterward. The nobles left quickly, eager to escape the shame of watching their princess wed an alien. The empress did not speak to her daughter, only came to embrace, holding her tight and whispering, "Be strong, sister." That night sat alone in her new chambers she would now share with her human husband. The room felt cold despite the warmth of the fires burning in the corners. She looked out the window at the stars and wondered how her life had come to this. The door opened and entered. He had changed from his uniform into simple clothes. He looked around the room slowly, then looked at her. "You do not have to pretend," he said. "I know you did not choose this." Turned to face him. "No, I did not." "Neither did I," said. He walked to a chair near the window and sat down. "My people needed this peace. Your people needed it too. We are both prisoners of duty." Was surprised by his words. She had expected arrogance from a human commander. She had expected demands. But he sat there quietly, looking out at the stars with eyes that seemed very far away. "You are not what I expected," she said. "What did you expect?" "A warrior, a savage. The stories say humans are." "I know what the stories say," interrupted gently. "Your people think we are animals, dangerous beasts who fight without reason." He paused. "Perhaps they are not entirely wrong." Frowned. "What do you mean?" Was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was even softer than before. "Humans are not strong. We are not fast. We do not live long lives like your people. In the galaxy, we are nothing special." He looked at her and something flickered in his dark eyes. "But when we are pushed, when we are threatened, when someone hurts the things we love, we become something else." "And what is that?" Did not answer. He simply turned back to the window and said, "I hope you never have to find out." The weeks passed slowly, and lived together but remained strangers. They ate meals in silence. They attended council meetings where the nobles looked at like he was dirt on their shoes. They slept in the same room but in separate beds, a wall of invisible ice between them. Watched her husband carefully. He was strange, this human. He woke early every morning and exercised for hours, pushing his body in ways that seemed almost painful. He read books, not just human books, but history, philosophy, poetry. He learned her language slowly but steadily until he could speak it almost without accent. But what surprised her most was his kindness. When the servants made mistakes, he did not shout or punish them. When the nobles insulted him, he did not fight back. He simply absorbed their hatred like a sponge absorbing water, never letting it show on his face. "Why do you not defend yourself?" asked him one evening. "They mock you every day, they call you names, they say you are less than nothing." Smiled slightly. It was the first time she had seen him smile. "Words are not weapons," he said. "They only hurt if you let them." "But does it not make you angry?" "Yes," he admitted. "But anger is a fire. It can warm you or it can burn you. I have learned to keep my fire controlled." He looked at her with those calm, dark eyes. For now. Did not understand what he meant. But she would remember those words later, when the galaxy burned and her quiet husband became something else entirely. For now, she simply watched him and wondered what secrets hid behind his gentle face. The peace held. The empire was stable, and somewhere in the darkness of space, enemies were watching, waiting, planning. The storm was coming, but no one knew it yet. 6 months had passed since the wedding, had grown used to her strange husband. He was still quiet, still gentle, still patient in ways that confused her. Sometimes she forgot he was a warrior at all. He seemed more like a scholar, always reading, always thinking, always watching the world with those calm eyes. But she had also started to notice other things about him. Small things. The way his body moved, smooth and controlled, like a predator pretending to be prey. The scars on his arms and chest that she glimpsed when he dressed. The way he sometimes stared at nothing, his mind traveling to places she could not follow. She had begun to wonder who he really was. The answer came on a cold morning in the 9th month. Was in the garden when the messenger arrived. He was running, his silver face twisted with fear. He fell at her feet and gasped out words that made her blood turn to ice. Though he said, "They have attacked." The Dominion was an empire that bordered both and human space. They were old enemies, cruel, powerful, and hungry for conquest. The peace treaty between the Inhumans had worried them. 2 enemies becoming allies was dangerous, so they had decided to act. Ran to the council chamber. The room was already full of nobles and generals, all shouting at each other. Her mother sat on her throne, her face pale with shock. Maps floated in the air, showing red marks where the attacks had happened. The damage was beyond imagination. 3 colony worlds had been destroyed. Not conquered, destroyed. They had used weapons of terrible power, burning the planets until nothing remained but ash and stone. 20 million had died in a single night. Among them was Uncle and his entire family. Felt her legs go weak. She grabbed a pillar to steady herself. 20 million. The number was too large to understand. It was not a battle, it was slaughter. "We must surrender," one of the nobles said. His voice was shaking. "They are too strong. If we fight, they will destroy us all." "We cannot surrender," another noble argued. "They killed our people. They broke every law of war. Surrender means death." "Then what do we do?" the Empress asked. Her voice was tired, broken. She looked old in that moment, older than had ever seen her. No one answered. The generals stared at their maps. The nobles whispered to each other. Fear filled the room like smoke. Then the door opened and walked in. He was wearing his uniform again, the simple black cloth with the silver pin. He walked slowly through the crowd, and the nobles moved aside for him without thinking. Something about the way he moved made them step back, like animals sensing a predator. He stopped in front of the Empress and bowed. "Your Majesty." The Empress looked at him with empty eyes. "You have heard." "Yes." "Then you know we are doomed. They will come for us. They will destroy our worlds one by one until nothing remains." Said nothing for a moment. He turned and looked at the maps floating in the air. He studied the red marks, the positions of the fleet, the locations of the remaining defenses. His face showed no emotion. His eyes were cold, calculating, utterly calm. Then he spoke, "May I address the council?" The Empress waved her hand weakly. "Speak." Turned to face the nobles and generals. They looked at him with suspicion and fear. This human, this small creature from a young species, what could he possibly say that would matter? "I have studied them for many years," began. His voice was quiet but clear. "They are strong, yes. They have large fleets and powerful weapons, but they have weaknesses." "What weaknesses?" a general demanded. "They just destroyed 3 of our worlds." "They destroyed defenseless colonies," said. "That is not strength, that is cowardice." He pointed at the map. "Look at their attack pattern. They struck soft targets, places with no military value. They avoided our warships, our bases, our fortresses. Why?" The room was silent. "Because they fear a real fight," continued. "They are bullies. They attack the weak because they cannot face the strong. They committed this massacre to break your spirit, to make you surrender without a battle." He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each noble and general. "If you surrender, they win. If you fight, they will be afraid." One of the nobles laughed bitterly. "Fight with what? Our fleet is half their size, our technology is older, we would be crushed." "Your fleet alone, perhaps," said, "but you are not alone." The room went very quiet. Reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device. He pressed a button and a new image appeared in the air beside the maps. It was a fleet of ships, human ships, hundreds of them, thousands of them, more ships than had ever seen in one place. "I have contacted Earth," said. "They are sending reinforcements. The full power of the United Fleet will arrive within 3 weeks." The nobles stared at the image with wide eyes. Even the Empress sat up in her throne. "You would help us?" she asked. "After everything, after how we have treated you?" "The peace treaty binds us together," said. "An attack on the Empire is an attack on Earth. We will not abandon our allies." He paused, and something changed in his voice. It became harder, darker. "And there is another reason." "What reason?" Looked at the Empress, and for the first time saw the fire behind his calm eyes. It was terrifying. It was like looking into the heart of a star. "The killed children," he said. His voice was soft, but it carried through the silent room like thunder. "They burned families in their homes. They murdered innocents who had done nothing wrong." He took a slow breath. "Humans do not forgive such things. We do not forget." He turned and walked toward the door. Before he left, he looked back at the council one more time. "Prepare your remaining fleets," he said. "Train your soldiers, gather your resources. When our reinforcements arrive, we will not defend." His eyes gleamed like black ice. "We will attack." Then he was gone. The room erupted in noise. Nobles argued. Generals shouted orders. The Empress called for silence again and again, but did not hear any of it. She stood frozen, staring at the door where her husband had disappeared. She had wanted to know who he really was. Now she was beginning to understand. That night she found him standing on the balcony of their chambers, looking up at the stars. The moons cast silver light across his face. He looked peaceful, almost gentle. But knew better now. "You have done this before," she said. It was not a question. Did not look at her. "Yes." "Fought wars, destroyed enemies." "Yes." Moved to stand beside him. "What will you do to the—" For a long moment was silent. Then he turned to look at her, and she saw the terrible fire burning behind his eyes. "I will make them remember," he said softly. For 1,000 years, every species in this galaxy will tell stories about what happens when you harm the innocent. That will become a warning, a lesson. Felt cold despite the warm night air. You will destroy them. Shook his head slowly. Destruction is too kind. I will break them. I will take everything they have, their pride, their power, their hope. I will show them what human wrath truly means. He turned back to the stars, and his voice dropped to a whisper. They wanted war, now they will have it. The human fleet arrived on the 21st day, stood at the observation deck of the palace, watching the sky fill with ships. They came through the jump gates in waves, destroyers, cruisers, carriers, battleships, each one larger and more terrifying than the last. The nobles who had mocked her husband now stood in stunned silence, their silver faces pale with shock. There were over 2,000 ships. It was the largest fleet the galaxy had ever seen gathered in one place. And at the center of it all was a ship that made even the battleships look small. It was black as midnight, shaped like a dagger pointed at the stars. Red lights glowed along its sides like angry eyes. This was the USS Redemption, the flagship of Earth's united fleet. This was a ship. Had not seen her husband for 3 days. He had been in the war room constantly, planning, organizing, coordinating with the human commanders who had arrived ahead of the fleet. When she caught glimpses of him in the hallways, he looked different. The gentle scholar was gone. In his place was something harder, colder, more focused. Now she watched as a shuttle descended from the Redemption and landed in the palace courtyard. Emerged with a group of human officers, all of them wearing the same black uniforms. They walked with purpose, their boots striking the stone in perfect rhythm. The Empress met them at the entrance to the palace. She bowed, the Empress of the Empire bowing to a human. A year ago, such a thing would have been unthinkable. Now it seemed natural. "Admiral," the Empress said, "we are grateful for your aid." Returned the bow. "We are allies, Your Majesty. Your fight is our fight." He glanced up at the observation deck and his eyes met. For just a moment, something soft flickered across his face, recognition, perhaps even warmth. Then it was gone, replaced by the cold mask of command. The War Council began an hour later. Was allowed to attend as a princess of the Empire, though she suspected her mother also wanted her there to watch her husband. The room was filled with generals and human officers, all gathered around a massive holographic display of the galaxy. Stood at the center, speaking in a calm, clear voice. He pointed at various points on the map, explaining positions, movements, strategies. The generals listened with growing respect. This was not the fumbling speech of an amateur. This was the voice of a master. "They expect us to defend," said. "They expect us to wait behind our walls while they pick off our colonies one by one. They believe we are afraid." He looked around the room. "We will prove them wrong." He pressed a button and the map changed. Red arrows appeared, showing attack routes that cut deep into territory. "We will strike at their supply lines here, here, and here," continued. "We will cut off their forward fleets from their home systems. And then," he pressed another button, and a single red arrow appeared, pointing straight at the heart of the Dominion. "We will take the war to their doorstep." One of the generals shook his head. "That is madness. The home systems are heavily defended. We would lose half our fleet trying to break through." "We will lose nothing," said. His voice was ice. "Because the will not expect us. They believe they are the hunters. They do not know they are the prey." The planning continued for hours. Ships were assigned to different formations. Attack schedules were created. Supply routes were established. Watched in amazement as her husband transformed chaos into order, turning a desperate defense into an aggressive assault. When the council finally ended, she followed into the corridor. "Wait," she called. He stopped and turned. For a moment they stood facing each other, princess and admiral, wife and husband, strangers who shared a name. "You are different," said. "Since the attack, you have changed." Was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "No, I am the same as I have always been. You are simply seeing a part of me that was hidden." The warrior, yes, stepped closer. "Will you win truthfully?" His eyes met hers. In their dark depths she saw something that frightened her, not cruelty, not hatred, but absolute certainty. "I will win," he said, "no matter the cost." He turned and walked away, leaving her alone in the corridor with a heart full of questions. The first battle came a week later. Watched from the command center of the palace as the combined fleet engaged a force near the border. The display showed hundreds of ships moving in complex patterns, lights flashing as weapons fired across the void. At the center of it all was the Redemption, cutting through enemy formations like a blade through silk. The commanders watched with wide eyes. They had never seen anything like this. Human ships moved in perfect coordination, each one seeming to know exactly where it needed to be. Weapons fire converged on targets with deadly precision. Enemy ships exploded one after another, filling the void with fire and debris. And commanding it all was. His voice came through the communication channels, calm and steady, issuing orders with the rhythm of a heartbeat. "Formation 7, break left. Target their carrier group. Alpha Wing, cover the flanks. Redemption will take the center." Watched as the Redemption plunged into the heart of the enemy fleet. The massive ship absorbed hits that would have destroyed any vessel, its shields flickering but holding. Its weapons fired in all directions, each shot finding its mark. In 3 hours the battle was over. The fleet was destroyed completely, utterly destroyed. Not a single enemy ship escaped. They had lost only 12 vessels. The command center erupted in cheers. Generals embraced each other. Nobles wept with joy. Even the Empress allowed herself a small smile, but did not celebrate. She stared at the display, watching the tiny light that represented the Redemption, thinking about the man who commanded it. She had called him gentle, she had called him patient, she had thought him weak. She had been so very wrong. Over the following weeks the pattern repeated, battle after battle, victory after victory. The combined fleet pushed deeper into territory, destroying everything in its path. Supply stations burned. Defense platforms crumbled. Entire fleets were wiped from existence. And at the front of every battle was. He fought like something from ancient legends, a storm given human form, a fallen star burning across the darkness of space. He took risks that made the commanders gasp with fear, leading charges into impossible situations and emerging victorious every time. His ship bore scars from 100 engagements, but it kept flying, kept fighting, kept winning. They had expected an easy war. They had expected to crush their enemies with overwhelming force. Instead, they found themselves facing something they did not understand, a fury unlike anything they had ever seen. Watched every battle. She could not look away. This was her husband, this creature of fire and shadow. This was the man who had sat quietly in her chambers, reading poetry and speaking softly. This was the monster that had been hiding behind gentle eyes. One night after a particularly brutal victory, she found him in his quarters on the Redemption. He had taken to living on the ship, rarely returning to the palace. She had requested permission to visit him, and he had granted it. The room was small and simple. No decorations, no comforts, just a bed, a desk, and a window looking out at the stars. Sat at the desk, staring at nothing. He looked tired, more tired than she had ever seen him. The fire in his eyes had dimmed, replaced by something heavier, darker. "You came," he said. "I wanted to see you." Sat on the edge of the bed. "Everyone calls you a hero now. They say you are the greatest warrior in the galaxy." "Do they?" It was not a question. "Does it not make you proud?" Was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "Every ship I destroy has a crew. Every fleet I burn has families waiting at home." He looked at her, and she saw the weight of death in his eyes. "I am not a hero, I am a killer. I have always been a killer. The only difference is that now everyone can see it. Did not know what to say. She simply sat with him in the silence, watching the stars wheel past the window, feeling the weight of war pressing down on them both. The storm was still raging, but somewhere in its heart her husband was drowning, and she did not know how to save him. The final assault began on the 100th day of the war. Stood on the bridge of the Redemption, watching with a mixture of awe and terror. Before them lay the heart of the Dominion, their seat of power, their source of pride. A massive planet surrounded by rings of defense stations, orbital fortresses, and the largest fleet they had ever assembled. It was supposed to be unbreakable. For 1,000 years, no enemy had ever reached this system. They believed their home was sacred, protected by gods themselves. Today, those beliefs would shatter. Stood at the center of the bridge, hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on the enemy positions. He had not slept in 3 days. Dark circles hung beneath his eyes. His uniform was wrinkled, his hair unkempt. But his voice remained steady, his commands precise, his mind sharp as a blade. "All ships report status," he said. The replies came quickly. 1,500 vessels, human and together, all ready for battle. It was fewer than the force that waited for them. Nearly 2,000 enemy ships hung in the void, supported by countless defense platforms. By every calculation, this battle should be impossible, but had not come this far to lose. "Begin Phase 1, he ordered. The fleet split into 3 groups, each moving toward a different section of the enemy line. The commanders watched with confusion. This was not standard tactics. Human and ships were spreading thin, exposing their flanks, inviting attack. It was exactly what wanted. The fleet surged forward, eager to crush the divided enemy. But as they moved, they exposed their own formation. Gaps appeared in their defense lines. Communication channels filled with conflicting orders as different commanders argued about targets. "Phase 2, said calmly. Suddenly, the divided fleet united. Ships that had seemed scattered came together in perfect formation, targeting the gaps in the line with devastating precision. What had looked like weakness was revealed as a trap, a carefully designed illusion that drew the enemy out of position. The battle exploded into chaos. Gripped the railing as the Redemption shook from weapon impacts. Around them, ships died in brilliant flashes of light. The void filled with fire and debris. Voices screamed through the communication channels, commands, warnings, cries for help. Through it all stood motionless, watching, calculating, directing. Third formation pushed through Sector 7. Fifth wing cover the retreat of those cruisers. Redemption target that command ship. His orders came faster than could follow. Each one seemed impossible, reckless, insane, but each one worked. Enemy ships fell. Defense platforms crumbled. The line began to buckle. "They are breaking," one of the human officers reported. "Their center formation is collapsing." "Not enough," said, his eyes narrowed. "We need to end this decisively, prepare the Redemption for direct assault." The bridge went silent. Direct assault meant charging straight into the heart of the enemy fleet. It meant facing the concentrated fire of hundreds of ships. It was suicide. "Admiral," the first officer said carefully, "the probability of survival." "I did not ask for probability," interrupted. His voice was ice. "I gave an order." The first officer hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, sir, preparing for direct assault." Moved to stand beside her husband. "You should not be here," he said without looking at her. "This ship may not survive." "I know," straightened her spine. "I am staying anyway." For the first time turned to look at her. Something flickered in his exhausted eyes, surprise perhaps, or gratitude. "As you wish," he said softly. The Redemption surged forward. What happened next would become legend across the galaxy. A single ship, burning like a falling star, plunged into the heart of the greatest fleet that had ever assembled. Weapons fire poured toward it from every direction. Shields screamed under the assault. Hull plating melted and burned. But the Redemption did not fall. It carved through enemy formations like a blade through flesh. Its weapons fired without pause, each shot finding a target. Ships exploded around it. Debris bounced off its damaged hull. Fire bloomed and died in the vacuum of space. And at its center, commanded with absolute calm. Target the command station. All forward batteries fire. The Redemption's main weapon spoke. A lance of burning light shot across the void and struck the command station, a massive orbital fortress that coordinated the entire defense fleet. The station's shields held for 1 second, 2 seconds, 3, then collapsed. The fortress exploded in a ball of white fire. Without coordination, the fleet fell into chaos. Ships began to retreat. Defense platforms went silent. The organized resistance collapsed into panic and flight. All ships advance, ordered. Destroy the remaining defense grid. Prepare ground forces for planetary occupation. The battle continued for 6 more hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. The fleet was shattered. Their defense platforms were reduced to floating wreckage. There lay exposed, defenseless, conquered. Watched as inhuman ships descended toward the planet below. Somewhere down there, the rulers of the Dominion were waiting, terrified, knowing that their empire had ended in a single day. She turned to look at. He stood alone at the front of the bridge, staring at the conquered world. His face showed no triumph, no satisfaction, no joy, only weariness, only weight. "It is over," said. Did not respond for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was hollow. "The battle is over, the war is not." "What do you mean?" He finally turned to face her. In the dim light of the bridge, he looked older than his years, aged by something deeper than time. Killing their fleet was necessary. Conquering their world was necessary, but that is not enough to end a war. He walked slowly toward the viewport, gazing down at the planet below. We must break their will. We must make them understand that they can never do this again, that no one in this galaxy should ever consider such slaughter again. Felt a chill run down her spine. What will you do? What must be done? In the following days, address the conquered. His words were broadcast across their entire world, into every home, every shelter, every hiding place. "You attacked without warning," he said, his voice cold and steady. "You murdered millions of innocents. You burned worlds that had done nothing to deserve such hatred." He paused. "I could do the same to you. I could turn your cities to ash. I could destroy everything you have built. You would deserve no less." They listened in silence, waiting for the hammer to fall. "But I will not." His voice softened slightly. "Because that would make me no better than you. Instead, I offer you a choice. Your rulers who ordered this war will stand trial. Your military will be disbanded. Your weapons will be destroyed. In return, your people will live. Your world will survive. You will have the chance to become something better than what you were." He leaned forward, and his eyes burned into the cameras. "But remember this. We are watching, the humans, every species that has suffered under your cruelty. If you ever raise weapons against the innocent again, we will return. And next time there will be no mercy. Next time there will be only fire." The broadcast ended. In the silence that followed, they surrendered. Their rulers emerged from their bunkers, broken and terrified. Their armies laid down their arms. Their empire, which had terrorized the galaxy for centuries, crumbled into dust. And across the stars, every species heard the message. Every civilization understood the lesson. The humans were not to be underestimated. The humans protected their allies. The humans punished those who harmed the innocent. The humans were terrifying. And their admiral, the quiet man who had wed a princess for peace, had proven it beyond all doubt. The victory celebrations lasted for weeks. Every world in the Alliance held festivals and parades. Statues of Admiral appeared in city squares. Songs were written about his battles. Children played games pretending to be human warriors, fighting imaginary with sticks and toy ships. But the hero himself was nowhere to be found. Search for her husband in the palace, in the command center, on the Redemption. No one had seen him. He had simply disappeared after the final broadcast to the, slipping away like smoke in the wind. She finally found him on the third day in a place she did not expect, a small garden on the outskirts of the palace grounds. It was an old place, overgrown and forgotten, used by no one for many years. Sat on a stone bench beneath a twisted tree, staring at nothing. His hands were shaking. Approached slowly, afraid to startle him. He did not look up as she sat beside him. He simply sat there, trembling, his eyes fixed on the ground. "They are calling you a god," said softly. "The savior of the Alliance, the greatest warrior in history." Laughed, it was a hollow, broken sound. "A god, is that what they say?" "Yes." "Then they are fools." He finally looked at her and felt her heart crack at what she saw. His eyes were red from crying. His face was pale and worn. The calm mask he had worn throughout the war was gone, revealing the shattered man beneath. "I killed them," he whispered. "So many of them. I watched their ships burn. I heard their screams through the communication channels. I gave orders and thousands died." His voice broke. "I remember every single one." Did not know what to say. She had watched him fight with such terrible efficiency, such cold precision. She had assumed he felt nothing, that he was somehow above the horror of what he did. But now she understood the truth. He felt everything. "How do you bear it?" she asked. Was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely audible. "I do not know anymore. In the beginning I told myself it was necessary, that the lives I took saved more lives in the end, that the evil I did served a greater good." He shook his head slowly. "But now I look at my hands and all I see is blood. I close my eyes and all I hear is screaming. The faces of the dead follow me everywhere." Tears ran down his cheeks. He made no effort to hide them. "This is what humans are," he continued. "This is why we fight so fiercely, so ruthlessly, because we feel. Every death is a weight on our souls. Every life we take becomes part of us forever." He looked at her with haunted eyes. "Your people think we are savage. They think we are monsters, but the truth is worse. We are neither. We are creatures who understand exactly what we do, and we do it anyway." Reached out and took his trembling hands in hers. They were warm despite the cold air. Human hands so small compared to hands so fragile. And yet these hands had shaped the fate of the galaxy. "You are not a monster," she said firmly. "A monster would not weep for his enemies. A monster would not carry their deaths like scars on his heart." "Then what am I?" Thought about everything she had seen. The gentle scholar who read poetry and learned her language. The patient husband who endured insults without complaint. The terrifying warrior who burned across the stars like falling fire. The broken man who wept alone in forgotten gardens. "You are human," she said at last, "and that is more complicated than any of us understood." Stared at her for a long moment. Something shifted in his eyes, not healing, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of it. The first crack in the wall of grief that surrounded him. "I thought you hated me," he said. "When we married, I saw the disgust in your eyes, the shame of being bound to a human." "I was a fool," admitted. "I saw only what I expected to see. A creature from a young species, weak and short-lived. I did not see you." "And now?" Squeezed his hands. "Now I see a man who gave everything for people he did not know, who burned himself to ashes so others could live, who carries a weight that would crush anyone else." She lifted one hand and gently touched his face. "I see someone worth loving." Closed his eyes. A shudder ran through his body, not from cold but from something releasing inside him, something he had held tight for too long. "I do not know how to stop," he whispered. "The war is over, but I am still fighting inside. Every moment, every breath, I feel the battle continuing." "Then let me help you," said. You do not have to carry this alone. That is what marriage means, does it not? Sharing burdens, facing darkness together. She pulled him close, wrapping her arms around his trembling body. He resisted for a moment, old habits, old walls. Then he collapsed against her, his face buried in her shoulder, his tears soaking her dress. They stayed like that for a long time. The sun moved across the sky. Shadows lengthened in the garden. Somewhere in the distance, music played from the ongoing celebrations. But here, in this forgotten corner of the palace, a warrior wept and a princess held him. Eventually lifted his head. His eyes were swollen and red, but something had changed in them. The terrible weight was still there, but it seemed lighter now, shared rather than carried alone. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For staying, for seeing me." He managed a small smile, the first genuine smile she had seen from him since the war began. "For being my wife." Smiled back. "We were prisoners of duty when we married. Perhaps we can be something else now." "What would you like to be?" She considered the question. A year ago she would have laughed at the idea of caring for this human. He was supposed to be nothing, a political tool, a symbol of alliance, a temporary inconvenience. But war had changed everything. She had watched him sacrifice himself for her people. She had seen his strength and his fragility. She had discovered that the quiet man she had dismissed was more complex, more beautiful, and more terrifying than anything she had imagined. "I would like to be your partner," she said. "Your companion, someone who walks beside you through whatever comes next." Smile widened slightly. "That sounds nice." They sat together as the evening came, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. The same stars that had witnessed so much death now looked down on something new, two people from different worlds, finding each other amid the ashes of war. The galaxy would remember Admiral as a hero. Songs would be sung about his victories. Stories would be told about his terrible brilliance in battle. Children would play at being warriors, dreaming of glory. But would remember something else. She would remember the man who trembled in the garden, the husband who wept for his enemies, the human who carried the weight of every life he had taken, refusing to let himself forget. The truth about humans was not that they were savage or cruel or monstrous. The truth was that they felt everything, every joy, every sorrow, every life, every death. They burned so brightly because they knew how short their time was. They fought so fiercely because they loved so deeply. Had married a human for peace. She had watched him wage war like a falling star. And now, in the quiet aftermath, she understood something her people had never grasped. Humans were not to be feared because of their strength. They were to be loved because of their hearts. She leaned against her husband's shoulder, feeling his warmth, hearing his steady breathing. The war was over. The healing could begin. And somewhere in the darkness of space, the stars burned on, witnesses to a love born from fire and forged in the flames of war.